was about 3 or 4, my grandmother passed away. Soon after, all of my extended family flew into town for the funeral. A week after the funeral, some relatives were still in town, including my uncle and his family. My grandmother had wanted us to sell the house after she passed, so my family did exactly that. It was hectic because we were trying to pack everything up while everyone still had to go to work and school. On one of the days, we were packing up the house. Both my parents were at work. My older cousins were at school, and my uncles and aunts were busy with jobs or other responsibilities. However, my uncle, my grandmother's oldest son, was available to watch me for a couple of hours, so he did. According to him, at one point I asked to go to the bathroom while he was watching TV. The closest bathroom was in my grandparents' old room, so I went there. When I came back, I asked my uncle who the nice lady on the bed was. He played along, probably thinking I was talking about an imaginary friend. He asked me questions about her to keep the conversation going. I described her as dark-haired, fairly pale, and wearing a blue nightgown. When I said that, my uncle freaked out because my grandmother had always worn a light blue nightgown to sleep. After that, my uncle and I left the house and waited outside until my parents came home. I was 3 years old and distinctly remember waking to see an elderly man, a stranger, sitting on my bed. It's still so vivid, even 37 years later. I remember in detail how brightly the sun shone through the white gauze curtains, being wide awake and clutching my pink braided bedspread up to my chin, just gazing up at this man who was looking down at me and smiling. He had a big, beautiful, and kind smile. I remember his blue eyes and thinning white hair, the visible skull, even the white sweater and gray slacks he was wearing. He didn't say anything, just patted my knee through the bedspread. He looked delighted, with crinkles at the corners of his eyes. He seemed as though he had been telling me a bedtime story that I had been interrupted. That's a thought I clearly remember, like I had awoken in the middle of it. I wasn't scared at all. Truthfully, I was odd, because I had never seen someone who looked like him. My family and I are Mexican American, and we all have the typically associated dark hair and dark eyes with olive skin. This man was just so white, fair-skinned, snowy, with transparent hair and those blue eyes. It was like he was glowing, even in my sunlit room. He looked down at me for a few more seconds, still smiling, and the next thing I knew, my mom entered the room, and he was gone. Of course, the first thing I did was ask her who the man was and where he went. I will never forget my mom's worried, panicked look when I asked her this. She ran out of the room, I assumed to check our small apartment, then came back in to ask me many questions. I told her everything, and that was that. She calmed down, I got out of bed, and we had a normal day. Years later, as an adult, I asked my mom if she remembered me ever telling her about a nice man sitting next to me in bed. She was shocked that I still recalled that morning, but then told me that, based on my descriptions, she was convinced her grandfather had paid me a visit from beyond. He was from Spain, and looked like a gringo, she said. Right down to the blue, blue eyes and thinning white hair. She told me he was always smiling and, yes, favored sweater and slacks combinations. He had passed away about 30 years before I was born. I don't know what to think about it, but here it goes. Around 8 years ago, I was on vacation with my parents and my cousin. My sister couldn't come because she had just started her first job, so she stayed home by herself. When we were children, my sister and I used to be really close, mainly because we shared a room for the first 7 to 9 years of my life. We even had our own code using taps to ask things like, "Are you already asleep?" or "Are they?" which is our parents asleep. Stuff like that. She has always been the kind of person who's doing something or looking for something to do, and she's always the first one up in the morning. When she wanted me to wake up, she would put her face as close to mine as possible and just stare at me. I don't know how long she would stay like that, but I can clearly remember waking up multiple times to her doing this. Of course, I'd shout or at least panic until I realized it was her. I guess it was fun for her, and to be fair, I also did it to her a couple of times. Fast forward to our trip. It had been at least 10 to 12 years since my sister last pulled that prank on me. We weren't as close as before. We'd grown a little apart, but we still love each other. It was the last night of our trip before heading back to our city. We had just found a nice hotel close to the pyramids in Palenque, which meant no cell phone service. We were sharing a room, my mom and dad in one bed, and my cousin and I in the other. At around 4 o'clock a.m., I woke up with the same old sensation that someone was staring at me. I opened my eyes and could clearly see a face. My immediate reaction was to shout, waking my mother up. I have to say, that feeling alone is pretty scary, but years of my sister waking me up like that made it feel oddly familiar. So, despite shouting, I wasn't really scared. My mom turned on the light and asked me what happened. I told her I was pretty sure my sister had just woken me up. I knew it didn't make any sense, but I felt it was her. Though I can't say I saw her face clearly. I just saw a face, and then it disappeared immediately. My mom, who is very superstitious, couldn't sleep after that because she felt something was odd. I couldn't sleep either, thinking of my sister. Later that morning, we noticed we all had several missed calls. My sister had been involved in a really bad car accident. Luckily, she only had minor injuries. To this day, I don't know what to make of that experience. My brain tells me it was just a coincidence. On the other hand, it's the only way I would have thought of my sister while sleeping. It felt so real, so between the two of us. As an extra, on our previous visit to Palenque, my parents, my sister, and I, when we were at the ruins, we could hear drums. My parents said it was raining, and we were playing with the ponds when the drumming started. Our curiosity led us to follow the sound, going deeper and deeper into the jungle. I can't remember why we stopped, but when we finally made it to the exit and asked the security guard about the music, he said, "So you heard the drum as well?" He then told us that many people had heard them at different times, and no one knew where they came from.